People kept going missing from my town over the last couple of years. Their mangled remains were all that were ever found of them, if anything was found at all, and many thought that some sort of large predator was to blame. I guess that in the end, they weren't far off, but they may never know the whole truth. At least, I hope not. They erected a bulletin board at the edge of the woods and covered it with missing posters. Even though the passage of time had seen fit to erase them, much like the beast, the images still served a purpose. Not only as a grim reminder of our vulnerability and mortality, but also as a warning of the danger that lurked beyond. However, the potential danger of entering the woods did nothing to deter many of our residents. They refused to live their lives in fear. Many of them were experienced woodsmen, so I can't say that I blame them for being confident, even if it was foolish. They believed that taking precautions and being armed would save them, no matter how nonsensical the sentiment was in contrast to the piling cases. In my experience, pride and arrogance rarely serve as anything more than a fast track to disaster. A few days ago, my best friend informed me that he would be going into the woods because he needed to retrieve his trail cameras. He had to work until late in the evening, so there was only a short window to get them before night set in. Although he protested, I refused to let him go alone as I couldn't bear the thought of him becoming the next victim. I didn't have any family left, and the one that remained I never got to see. My father had disappeared many years ago, and my mother and grandparents were all long dead. I was closer to him than anyone else in this world. Though we should have made haste in collecting the cameras, we allowed time to slip away from us. The evening was spent drinking beer, goofing around, and getting distracted by even the most trivial things that we'd stumble upon along the trails. We let our worries fade away and focused on having fun, as we always did. But there's nothing more that I regret in this life than not rushing to get the job done before nightfall, as we planned. This one was smashed to pieces too, just like the rest. Only a few more left to check, Rick said to me as we walked back to our ATVs. Didn't know you had so many, bro, ha ha ha, I replied, crushing a beer can. I like to know what's going on out higher. Been hoping to get a pic of whatever it is that's been taking our folks, too. Maybe one of the remaining cams'll. I stopped short. I heard something large moving through the woods. Matt, you hear the? Rick started. Shh, I interrupted, then whispered, turn your light out and get down. Okay. I'm a hunkered down by move four-wheeler, Rick replied, then crouched down beside his ATV. We both turned off our lights and continued to listen. The sound grew closer and closer until it was almost right on top of us. We remained silent and motionless and tried to peer through the dense brush surrounding us, although our eyes hadn't yet fully adjusted to the dark. All of a sudden, we were overwhelmed by a putrid scent, stronger than any I had ever smelled. It was eerily reminiscent of a corpse, but altogether different and much more intense. I looked over at Rick to find that he was holding his nose. He then shot me a disgusted, yet puzzled, look. The noises ceased. I placed my hand upon my holster, undid the buckle, and slowly drew my .45 loaded with hollow points. Rick reached up and grabbed his shotgun from the rack on his ATV. Both of us were ready to defend ourselves and each other. Tensions were high as we continued to scan our immediate area. Everything remained still for a time, until a hulking mass burst out of the foliage and went straight for Rick. SHI was all that he managed to yell before it tackled him. The force from the blow sent his ATV rolling off into the brush. This initial assault was promptly followed by the sounds of ripping flesh and cracking bones. Rick! I screamed, then opened fire in the direction of the hulking silhouette. But my efforts were in vain. It paid no attention to me nor my barrage of bullets, and they seemed to have no effect on it. I needed to load a new magazine, but when I attempted to retrieve it from my belt I dropped it. I clicked my flashlight back on so that I could find the magazine swiftly, but made the mistake of having it pointed toward Rick when the beam came to life. He lay on the ground, motionless. His arms were separated from his body, his abdomen was flayed open, and his intestines and organs were strewn about. Enormous chunks of flesh were missing from him, appearing as if they had been bitten off. My stomach turned in revulsion, and feelings of anger and sorrow began to consume me. But they were quickly replaced by paralyzing fear when I brought the beam of light upward toward his attacker. It was humanoid, albeit nothing more than a cruel mockery of the human form. The beast was much taller than any man or ape could ever hope to be. It was hairless, lanky, and its gray skin was stretched tightly over the bones beneath. Its appearance resembled that of a skeleton covered in a thin layer of flesh. It looked back at me over its shoulder, then dropped a chunk of meat before turning to face me. Its eyes were solid white and sunken way back into the depths of its skull. The lips were tattered as if it had chewed them off, and its mouth was filled with razor-sharp teeth. It sniffed the air, then stared back at me with those hideous white eyes. The creature tilted its head from side to side as it studied me, a look of perplexity beginning to show on its face. Then it pounced. And that's the last thing I remember before I woke up here in the hospital. Once the initial grogginess began to wane, I tried to sit up, but was immediately overwhelmed by a searing pain that ran diagonally across my chest. My head began to pound intensely, and my abdomen felt like it was going to burst. I clenched my teeth and took in a sharp breath before I surrendered and laid back down. "Hey, now. Take her easy there, Matt." "Dad?" I responded, fighting the urge to sit up. "Yeah, son. It's me. Long time no see. Let me sit you up," he said before I heard him get up and make his way over to me. He then grabbed the control for the hospital bed. "Where have you been all this time?" I asked as my upper half was elevated. "It's a long story. We'll get there," he replied, then laid the control back down and returned to his seat in the far corner of the room. I hadn't seen him for many years, and time hadn't been kind to him. The skin that I could see was covered in various types of scars. He had a shaggy beard, his hair had turned gray, and he had massive bags under his eyes. His appearance gave the impression that he hadn't slept in ages. He looked like a man who had seen and been through more than his fair share. What happened? Rick. I exclaimed as memories of the incident began to spring forth. "He's gone, son, and you're lucky to be alive." My eyes began to well up with tears. "Rick, no. That thing. There was some kind of creature, Dad. It killed." "Shh, easy now. It's all right, boy. There was nothing you could have done. That thing is no natural beast." "Well," I began, "what kind of beast is it?" "Patience, son. We'll get to everything in time. Let's start from the attack." "Okay, then. How did I end up here?" I asked him. "It slaughtered your friend, then started on you." He leaned back in the chair and crossed his ankle over his knee. "That's when I showed up to the rescue. You're lucky I got there when I did." I was taken aback. "You saved me?" "Yup." We sat in silence for a moment, staring at each other, neither knowing what to say. Then I finally spoke up. "What made you come back? How'd you know where to look?" I asked. "I know I'm not exactly an easy man to get a hold of," he said in a flat tone, masking his sarcasm. "BFFT, that's an understatement," I interrupted, my words carrying just a touch of aggravation. He ignored my commentary, but I finally caught wind that something has been happening to the people here for quite some time. I had an inkling of what it was right away, and rushed to get here. My father stared at me for a moment, then got out of the chair and walked towards the door of my hospital room. He slowly leaned his head through the doorway, looked left and right to see if the coast was clear, then quietly shut the door. Dad then promptly turned the deadbolt into place before returning to his seat. Anyway, I got to town and started collecting information. That's when I learned that you two dummies went up on the trail. I knew nothing good was gonna come of it, so I took off after y'all. Got to you just in time. So you saw it? Yup. But it ain't the first time. I was puzzled by this. My father was always mysterious and cryptic, the few times that I did get to see him growing up, but for him to know that a creature like that exists and do nor say anything about it? It didn't add up. I hit it several times with my .45 and didn't phase it. "What did you do to get it off me?" I asked him. "Simple. I shoot it off with a torch, and then hit it with a big ol' Molotov fair good measure," he replied smugly. "Now, that ain't enough to kill it fair good, mind ya, but it was enough to drive it away so that I could pull you out of them woods, and get you some help. Then I guess I shoot." "Thank ya," I said, lowering my head to the side before looking back at him. "So, thanks. But still, what is that thing? And where did it come from?" "I can't tell you what it's called. Saying it draws 'em. Talking about it is bad enough by itself," he answered before dropping his head for a moment, then looked back up at me with a solemn look on his face, "But I think it's time you knew." My father then began to tell me the truth behind everything, the profound reality of his life story.